The Ramayana is not told in the way that modern people can appreciate and imbibe. So I wanted to tell it like a modern story that would appeal to young people.
Is Rama Bhagwan? Is he a man? Is a superhuman, or is he a mythical figure?
The fact that Sri Rama existed, the fact that he was a great person, the fact that he had a wife called Sita, the fact that he lost her and had to recover her, that is historical. See, even Sri Ram didn't know that he was an Avtar. He didn't know that he was in anything special.
Or that Hanuman knew the godly or the divine nature of Bhagwan Rama.
No, he didn't know the divine nature. He admired him immensely for the person that he was.
Namaskar, Ram Ram. मेरा नाम है अर्जुन सिंह कादियान and I'm glad to get into conversation with Priya Arora जी. प्रिया जी ने ये किताब लिखी है रामा, A Man of Dharma. Penguin Publications ने किताब पब्लिश की है and प्रिया जी से और भी बातें हो रही थी and I began with the same thing कि किताब बहुत खूबसूरत ढंग से लिखी हुई है. Usually, and as some of you might know, I write on non-fiction, write on politics and history, and it's usually very tough to write English or literature which reads almost like poetry, and this book is very much like this, like that, and I think you've done a great justice in the sense कि वाल्मीकि जी भी चाहते थे ये किताब उसी ढंग से लिखी जाए कि it should be read like poetry. And so congratulations, very beautifully written.
Thank you.
You've very well done justice, and I think this book brings together a lot of those stories जो आज मॉडर्न जनरेशन शायद जानना चाहे, जो उनके दिमाग में क्वेश्चंस हैं भगवान राम से रिलेटेड और रामायण से रिलेटेड भी, वो सारे वो जानना चाहेंगे. और वो सारे क्वेश्चंस आपने बहुत अच्छे तरीके से, चाहे थ्रू एनेक्सेस बोलें या फुटनोट्स बोलें या प्रोलोग से बोलें, उन सब के अंदर आपने उन सारे क्वेश्चंस को अच्छे से एड्रेस किया है. सो कंग्रेचुलेशंस, जॉब वेरी वेल डन. Congratulations to your publishers and editors as well.
Thank you so much.
Well, ma'am,
thank you.
First, tell me why this book? Why Ram? Why Ramayana? It's a topic, it's a subject, and I think the reams of literature. मैं शायद आपको कह रहा था ना, शायद तो इमोशंस या जैसे प्रेम के बारे में जितना लिखा हुआ है शायद इस देश में उतना ही राम के बारे में या धर्म के बारे में लिखा हुआ है.
Correct.
तो ये टॉपिक क्यों चूज किया? What's the journey?
So this is a very good question क्योंकि there are millions of Ramayanas. You know, Valmiki of course wrote the original. उसके बाद कितने सारे रामायण हैं. There's all in all countries, in all states in India, so many Ramayanas. So what is the need for one more? That is the question. So the thing is, I felt that the Ramayana is not told in the way that modern people can appreciate and imbibe. So I wanted to tell it like a modern story that would appeal to young people, and so that's the way I have tackled it. The second thing is that, and probably the more important part, is that we have forgotten that we remember Ramji as Bhagwan, but not as the Maryada Purushottam that he was. What does that mean? The actual meaning of we know that he was Maryada, but what does it mean? What does that actual Maryada Purushottam point to as a person? What did it mean, and how is it relevant to us? Because if it's not relevant to us, then it's not interesting, right? It has to be relevant. And he speaks of the reason why he is relevant today is because, as I've put in my book, he is a man of dharma. And the dharma makes him forever relevant because dharma is eternal. Values come and go, morality comes and goes, rules come and go. So what was considered moral 200 years ago is maybe not moral today. Like, you know, child marriage was perfectly fine 200 years ago. Maybe when you were 13 you got married and there was nothing wrong with that. Today we would say that's immoral, generally. Polygamy we would say is immoral. So morality changes by age, but dharma doesn't change. Dharma is eternal. So dharma is as relevant in Treta Yuga when this happened as it is today. And you would ask me why. That's the natural question. Why is dharma eternal? Dharma is eternal because dharma is not about right and wrong. It's not about good and bad. It's about doing the right thing. And the right thing in the circumstances that you are in. The right thing can be different. So, dharma is different from morality. So, to explain this better, I have actually given an example in my book, and I am going to, it's a modern example because that's what we relate to better. So, just imagine you are in Germany during the time of the Nazis, and you are a Christian, right? And you are hiding your Jewish neighbors in your basement. Out of the goodness of your heart, to protect them, you are hiding them in your basement. The Nazis come knocking at your door and they say, are you hiding any Jews here? Or do you know where the Jews are? What is dharma at that point of time? To lie or to tell the truth? What would you consider dharma? To lie. So that's why dharma is eternal, because dharma is not based on laws like this, that you shouldn't tell a lie. It's not based on absolute. If it in the circumstance demands it, you should lie.
But then where is this calling coming from? Where is this response coming from? As in, is this intuition, or
So
is this
this
an
is-
innate human sense that you're perhaps trying to listen to the voice inside you?
So yes, there is a voice inside, but it is having that level of intelligence, because to practice dharma requires intelligence. You're not a follower. If you are a dharma, Sri Rama was a dharmagnya. He's described as dharmagnya, which means he understood dharma. Dharma ka unka gyan tha. He understood. Gnya means to know. So he knew dharma. Now, where did that come from? That was his intelligence, because dharma is something that you have to decide at the moment. Taking my example of the person protecting his Jewish neighbors, he has to use his intelligence at that point of time, that which is the higher dharma, protecting these people or telling the truth. Both are dharma. Telling the truth is the highest, one of the highest dharmas. But in this context, it's not dharma. In this context, telling the truth would be an adharma. Because why is it an dharma? Because it's going to get those people killed.
You know what the consequences are going to be.
Yes, and also telling a lie in this context is for paropkar. It's not for selfish reasons.
But then again,
So in terms of when it took place, start with that. There are many people who have, this is not my area of expertise, so I'm only going by
Yeah,
what I've,
the figures that you put in the book also.
yeah. So there are different people who have dated this. Most people have dated it to around 7,000 years ago, which is 5,114 BCE. So you know the exact date that the one I've taken is that he was born January 10th, 5,114 BCE. And now you'll ask me why we are celebrating Ram Navami in April.
no, but that
And
goes
not in
on. There are
because of
many
the precision of the equinoxes.
And there are many
You see?
people who,
That's
I
why.
think Nilesh Neelkanth
He has 12,000.
he's
So I think he is one of the few. I don't know of anybody else who has that date.
that as far.
And I'm not an expert in this, so I can't say.
There are
But
geologists and climatologists who also argue around 5,000.
yeah, but so the information that I relied on all corroborated with the 5,000 BC date, and that's why I put that.
So January 10th?
January 10th, 5,114 BC. And you know what it's based on? It's based on the sky charts.
Yes.
Because, they say, oh, how do you know when it took place? The best date stamp is the position of the stars. And the way it has been described, you can actually input all that information into the planetarium software, and it will pull up the date when the stars were in that position.
In fact, ये तो modern Gregorian calendar की वजह से है that we are obsessed with these, the dates that we see now. But पहले आज से शायद 125-150 साल पहले भी, when not in the cities, but of course गांव देहात के अंदर तो किसी बच्चे के पैदा होने की तो डेट इसी तरह होगी, नवमी से 4 दिन पहले पैदा, नवमी से 4 दिन बाद या नवमी के दिन पैदा हुआ. तो और वो जो ट्रेडिशन है वो लंबे दौर से चल रहा था. इनफैक्ट मेरे जो बड़े ग्रैंडफादर हैं उनकी डेट इसी तरह से याद की जाती है.
बिल्कुल.
तो ये जो स्टार और एस्ट्रोनॉमी वाला जो सिस्टम था has been long
ज़्यादा
successful.
accurate है
हाँ,
ये,
much more
much
accurate
more
and has
accurate.
been,
Yeah.
you know, it has a long legacy.
Long legacy.
वो चलता आ रहा है because of its some successes. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि something stands the test of time for 7,000 years or odd years or
Yes.
so for no reason at all.
Exactly.
People have been smarter and much more smarter than
Yes.
perhaps, you know, what our modern graduates perhaps are.
Right.
And I don't mean all of them. But then, so 5,000, roughly 5,000
That's what they
BC.
say. And you know, every date after that has also been, there's a star chart, which is date of Vanvas. That one. Then the next one, the Khardushan, the war that he had. Then when he went to Lanka. All these things are all date stamped. And they all follow the...
Astronomical date stamps.
Yes, and they all follow the chronology perfectly. You know, the time period. So I have a chapter in my book where I've explained that in more detail.
Yes.
But it's quite remarkable. How,
which is essentially
how
what
accurate.
makes this book also special, because you're dispelling a lot of those doubts and questions that a lot of young people may or may not have. Because one, of course, and we'll take this during our course of discussion, how is Bhagwan Ram, is Ram a Bhagwan? Is he a man? Is he a, you know, superhuman, or is he a mythical figure? ये जो सारी बातें हैं, these are modern questions, and these are, you know, we've had our you know, our minds colonized for so long that something जो हमारी दादी नानियाँ जनरेशन से गिनवाती बताती किससे सुनाती आ रही हैं, हम उनको भी डाउट करने लग गए.
Yeah.
It just evades me.
That is it. And you know, the interesting thing is, it's our Shastras teach us that questions are good. Doubt is good. It's nothing wrong with it.
Nothing wrong
You
with it.
ask as many questions as you like, even about Sri Rama, about Sri Krishna, respectful questions.
Absolutely.
But you can ask,
You can
why
ask.
did he do this? He should not have done this. Maybe he should have done that.
उसी debate से
Perfectly
तो हमारी
valid, because
civilization
from
progress
that
हुई है.
comes your learning. Right? If you don't ask questions, you just accept what somebody said, how are you going to grow?
इसीलिए जो पहले जो शास्त्रार्थ हुआ करता था, वो इसी वजह से तो था कि who has better understanding of dharma.
Exactly.
वो होता कैसा था, जब आप
have to
questions
debate.
discussion करते हो, you debate. तो बनारस इसलिए तो मशहूर हुआ वो तो for the longest time.
Absolutely.
क्योंकि आप debates हुआ करती थी वहाँ पर.
Yes. And in fact, our whole way of learning is through Shravanam, Mananam and Nididhyasan. So Shravanam is you first listen. That is the first step. Then Mananam is you contemplate on it. You ask questions, doubt resolution. There should be doubt resolution. Right? Like if you have a question, why did Sri Rama kill Vali from the tree, behind the tree? Why did he not face him? Right? Valid question.
Valid question.
And Vali himself is critical about that in this. And
he does.
He himself brings that up. Yeah, why did you do this?
But such questions are much more in Mahabharata.
Yes, and they're all valid.
So we've understood the time stamp you've given. We've also understood कि रामायण जिस दौर में लिखी गई उस तरह लोग किस तरह के थे. धर्म was still at 75%. पर geography क्या थी? Where was it happening?
So
राम और रावण दोनों की geography.
So mainly the way from Valmiki Ramayana talks about Ayodhya, of course, which we know is where it is. Though the people debate that, but I think it is where it is. And
I mean in 2024, January के बाद फिर उसके बाद elections भी हो गए. People still don't know where Ayodhya is. I mean, you got to be living under some really heavy rock.
Yeah, exactly. And then the whole journey, obviously Chitrakoot, and then Panchvati, which is Nasik today, and then down, and then Kishkinda, which is Hampi, which I just visited. I was so excited to have gone there because it's exactly the way it's described.
Coming back from Kishkinda, no?
Yes, I just came back, and for me it was a surreal experience because I'm like seeing the Ramayana enacted over there. You know, every place I went to. In fact, I even went to Hanumanji's birthplace, which is on the Anjaneyagiri hill. They have the hill, and that's like 450 plus steep steps, which I trudged up. I have to say, halfway through, I said, I think I'm not going anymore. I can't do this. So we had gone with some friends, and they said, no, you have to go. You can't not go now. So finally, we went up, which was great. It was a wonderful experience. But, you know, everything is there exactly as it's described.
So I mean, that also begs the question could have perhaps taken it up later in the conversation. But what do you think about the historicity of Ramayana?
If you ask me, I have a whole chapter on that in the book.
Yeah,
because
I went through it, which is
because you know, there's so much evidence for Rama's historicity as a character. So you know, we think that it's referred to as mythology, which I really have a problem with, because in our Puranas, in all our Shastras, when they talk about the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, they call it itihas. It's referred to as itihasa, not as kalpanic.
Story,
So it's not a mythical story.
As it is.
It is events that happened. Now you can say that is every single thing in that historical? Maybe not, because it's been told by word of mouth for thousands of years. Before it was written, it was actually orally communicated. Now when you communicate something orally, there are additions that come in. There are things that change. So everything may not be 100%, but the fact that Sri Rama existed, the fact that he was a great person, the fact that he had a wife called Sita, the fact that he lost her and had to recover her, that is historical. So the point I'm saying is that the basic story is historical. There may be hyperbole in it because it's an epic, and that's the epic style. The epic style is is part of the poet's poetic license.
I mean, I remember
to exaggerate.
You have to write it, because
you have to.
Histories in India have never been written. They were always oral histories.
Exactly.
And oral histories, you've got to bring in some highs and lows. You've got to take some creative liberty to ensure that whatever you're saying
is interesting,
is impressionable for the audience as
well.
It sticks to their mind. If I say कि भाई मतलब एक व्यक्ति बैठा था वहाँ पे चार बातें करने के लिए, in contrast ऐसे कि लंबी जटाओं वाला, आँख में कालिक लगे, माथे पे सिंदूर का टीका लगा हुआ था और भव्य ढंग से अंगूठा पहन रखा था. And then I went on describing him in 3 sentences perhaps more. फिर वो बात जो ऑडियंस है या फिर जो रीडर है उसके दिमाग में लंबे समय से टिकती है. And which I think is the creative liberty that our historians or our chroniclers have taken, because they were not writing it, they were ensuring that they pass the message to somebody else, and that somebody else was supposed to pass to somebody else. And that is essentially how for 7,000 years repeatedly we've told the story of Bhagwan Ram again and again, and ensured that this generation gets to know about it.
That is it. So I'm totally on board with the fact that it's historical. I mean, that in my mind there's no doubt, and I've given actual evidence why.
And there are also people over the centuries who have come by and just agreed that this was the bridge that Rama crossed and all those things. So since before, I mean, this is also because of colonial education, I think, and it's also because over the last 75 years we've not been able to develop that confidence to really counter it, कि हम अपनी existence के बारे में doubt या प्रश्न पहले पूछ रहे हैं, rather than seeing it from the other point of view. Rather than doubting yourself, first question the veracity of the claims of the other side. Why not do that first in the place? And you've please share the story of how Ramayana begins, because many viewers and many people would just know the basic context of Ramayana or how the story unfolds, but वो starting अध्याय ही है जिसके अंदर which sets the entire context as to who is Ram, where is he from, what are the 16 qualities that make him so special, and how does Ramayana begin?
So it begins with Valmiki asking his guru Narada. Narada was his guru, because Valmiki was a daku. He was actually a hunter who became a daku because he couldn't feed his family. So he had to steal he had an endless family, had to feed them, so he had become a daku. And then Narada actually converted him into a good person by telling him to, he caught him, and that's a long story, which I won't tell here, but he was a guru. So he says, who is there? Can you tell me, is there a person in existence today? He says, Kaun vasmin sampratam loke, gunavan kascha viryavan, dharmagnyascha kritagnyascha satyavakyo dridavratah. So he says, who is there in today's world now who has these qualities? And then he goes on with 16 qualities that are very difficult to find in one person. Like a person who is not envious, a person who is, he says, samartha, anasuyaka, dyutiman, a person who is kritagya, a person who's dharmagnya, all these qualities.
Now, you've listed those 16.
Yeah, I've listed the 16 qualities.
Gunvan, Vryavan, Dharmajanya.
Dharmagnya,
yeah. Kritaganya.
Yeah.
Satyavakya.
Dridavratah.
Charitren cha yukta.
Yeah, that means a person of character.
Yeah. Sarva bhuteshu hita.
Someone who looks at other people's
welfare.
Not just his own.
Vidwan.
Learned.
Samarth.
Capable.
Eka Priya Darshana.
Beautiful looking. He was extremely handsome. He was tall, dark and good looking. That was Sri Rama.
Atmavan.
Atmavan means someone who's self-controlled. Someone who knows, self-controlled.
Self-control. And is hence courageous, you have written.
And hence courageous.
Jita Krodha.
One who has conquered anger. So not someone who gets angry at every small little thing. He did get angry in this twice, but for reason. And the interesting thing is he did not act on that anger. So you see, as human beings, we have emotions. There are times when you will be angry. That's natural. The important thing is not to act on that anger. When you're angry.
What are those two instances when he got angry?
So he got angry the first time you see him really enraged is when Sita ji gets kidnapped.
So he gets enraged.
He gets enraged because he's looking for her everywhere. And our human emotions follow this trajectory. When something bad happens, the first reaction is intense grief. You get when that grief transforms then next into anger. That is the way it goes. Like if say somebody runs over a loved one, your first reaction will be intense grief that my loved one got run over. The next reaction will be anger towards that person who did the deed. So this is a natural way. So you see that he first is in extreme grief. He says, I cannot live without her. He says to Lakshman, he says, you go back, you tell Bharat to rule. I cannot leave. I have to find her. I cannot. She is my heartbeat. Cannot live without her. So that whole grief, which is beautifully explained in the Valmiki Ramayana. How he feels, and then it transforms to anger. And he says, I have to find her. If nobody will tell me, I will burn this world down. If nobody will tell me where she is. So now this anger, then Lakshman calms him down. He says, you are such a great person. How can you, as this great person that you are, punish innocent people or the world which is innocent for your own sorrow, right? And then he realizes. So the great thing about Sri Ram was his ability to control his emotions. He was,
and perhaps take a re-look at whatever he said.
Yes, also. And not to act on that anger. See, it becomes bad when you act on it. In a rage, a person can do anything. Even somebody, as great as Sri Ram saying he's going to burn down the world, right? Forget an ordinary person. So, but what the poet is trying to show us is that yes, whereas anger may be natural in certain circumstances, to act on it is not right. So he doesn't act on it. He immediately calms down when Lakshman gives him that advice. He calms down and he says, yeah, you're right. Let's just do our best to find her. That's what we will do. We'll do our best to find her.
Now, what was the second?
And the second time was when he gets upset with Varun Dev, because he's trying to cross the ocean, and he does this tapas, right? He lies down on thing and he prays to Varun Dev to come and help him, and he doesn't come. So then he gets enraged. He says, okay, if he's not coming, he obviously doesn't appreciate my asking nicely. He tells Lakshman, he says, I'm going to dry up the ocean. I'll dry up the ocean with my arrow, which he could do. And then we'll just walk across when there's no water there. And then Lakshman again stops him. He says, no, no, how can you? There's so many creatures in the ocean, they'll all die. You know? And again he calms down. And then also Varun Dev also appears then.
About time.
He comes and then he says this. But these are the only 2 times that he gets enraged. And in both times, he controls himself. So the lesson for us is that don't act in anger. Even Hanumanji does that. You know, when he burns Lanka, he does it in anger. You know, he gets upset and then he runs. He burns the whole of Lanka with his tail, right? And then he goes to the ocean to put his tail in there so that it will get extinguished, the fire, and cool down. So when he's doing that, then his temper also has calmed down by that point. Then he says, what did I do? I burnt this whole place. What if I burnt Sita ji also? Maybe, you know, in my anger, I did not pay attention to what I was doing. I was just burning at random. What if she's burnt? Then the very purpose for which I came here has been ruined. I've come here to find her, and maybe she's not there anymore. And then he talks about, he gives this thing about, he says, when a person is angry, they can do anything. It's a temporary madness. So he says you should never act in anger. You know? And then he goes and he finds her and she's safe. And he says, you know, thank goodness she's safe. But it could have been that she was also harmed by the fire. It could have been. So again, the lesson there is don't act in anger. If you get angry, don't act in anger. Same thing happens with Vali. You know, when Tara, his wife, was a very wise woman, Tara. So when Sugriv comes to ask him to fight, he fights with him, and then that time Ram doesn't help, because he can't tell the difference between the 2 of them. They look the same, twins, right? So they look almost the same. So he could not tell, so that's why he doesn't shoot. And then Sugriv says afterwards, he says, you didn't help me, you said you'd help me, now look at me, I'm all beaten black and blue. So he says, listen, I couldn't tell which one was you. So then he says, acha, you wear this mala. Now go and ask him again. So he goes back. Then Vali gets really mad. He says, listen, I just taught him a lesson. Fir se aa gaya? How dare he come again? So Tara says to him, she says, you're angry now. Don't go out and fight when you're angry. Don't do anything when you're angry. Calm down. Tomorrow you go. He doesn't listen. And he goes. And then he gets killed. So there's this constant focus on controlling your emotions. It's fine to have emotions, just don't act on them.
Just don't act on them. Okay.
Either when you're too angry or when you're too happy also. Don't forget, Dashrath gave Kaikeyi that boon of, blank check. Anything you want, blank check. He did that, why? He was tremendously happy with her because she saved his life, right? So when you're very happy or very angry or very sad, don't take any action.
And I think, I remember when Abhinav Bindra, he won the medal in shooting. One of the first things that was appreciated all across the country was that he put his gun down, no emotion, just a warm smile. And I think that people were appreciating this thing is because it's very much in our ethos. We understand that is very important. Just that we are not perhaps always acting so smart about it. We want to emulate those qualities, but can we is a question that everybody has to perhaps debate and discuss or talk to themselves about. Then of course is Dyutiman,
which is brilliant. He has that brilliance,
then
shining.
Anasuyaka.
So Anasuyaka is very interesting. Asuya is jealousy and fault finding. So like when you, and this is a very human quality, this thing of if somebody has a nice house, say, and you feel a little jealous. You say, house is nice, but they could have put some better flooring.
Half of, the entire conflict's about relative deprivation.
That is asuya. That is asuya. Because it's coming from fault finding, but from a kind of jealousy,
the
anger.
envy.
And that is very common in society today. So to be anasuyaka is to not have that kind of mentality. Be happy for people. If somebody has a nice house, congratulate them and be happy for them.
Perhaps very much for the Indian society, because we're going through that transition now where people are, or a large percentage or large number of people are seeing money and wealth for the first time.
Yeah.
200 years ago, people were not fighting to become AI engineers or big.
We had been reduced to poverty actually.
Yeah. So we are now going up again and then seeing wealth for the first time. There are many middle class families who are seeing wealth for the first time. And I think वहाँ पे ये quality बहुत वो actively बाहर निकल कर आता है कि everything.
Keeping up with the neighbors.
Keeping up with the neighbors.
Yeah.
So that idea of relative deprivation is very much.
So that's what he was. He was anasuyaka. So he did not look at other people's whatever and say, oh, they are so lucky, I am so unlucky. None of all this.
Bother ही नहीं करता, अपने में खुश हैं. Then there's Bibhyati Dev.
So he was such a, that means even such a powerful person, with, despite all these qualities, very gentle, but he was so powerful that even the devas feared him. That's what it is.
तभी वो वरुण वाला जो example.
Yes, so he was even feared by the devas, because not because of his, that he was not like Ravan was feared. Ravan was also feared, but in a different way. And in fact, the great thing about Sri Rama was that even his enemies praised him. So Maricha, whom he who was his enemy, he actually threw him into the sea, Maricha, when he was when he was protecting Vishwamitra's yagya. He killed Subahu. There were two brothers who were creating all the problems, throwing all that meat and blood and all that on his yagya and making it brushed. So he killed Subahu, one brother, made him into ash, reduced him to ashes. And Maricha, he threw him in 800 into the sea. He with his astra, he just threw him into the sea. So Maricha was his enemy. But Maricha, after some time, changed his ways and he became like a sadhu. So he was doing like tapasya in one cave somewhere. But Maricha had this thing is he was very good at changing his form. So that's why Ravan goes to him and says, I want you to do this job. And he gets very scared. He tells him, he says, no, don't do this. He says, no, he's terrible. You know what he did to my sister and all that. Actually, he was just wanting to, because Surpanakha had told him about how beautiful Sita was. Says she's such a beauty, she should be your wife. That's what she says. And she does that because she knows her brother is very lustful and she wanted to do that to get revenge.
So she did that knowingly.
She did that knowingly. She says that, in fact, she says, oh, she's so beautiful. I wanted to get her for you, and because I did that, Lakshman cut off my nose and ears.
Now this sets that debate.
So she just tried to get in favor. So she sort of bhadkaud him to go and do this deed.
But it settles that question because of many Ramayana renditions and many people end up asking these question कि Ravan was just doing to protect his sister. No,
he wasn't. He was doing it because he was very lustful. That was one of his. He had a lot of good qualities, by the way. It was not that he didn't have good qualities, but he had this this character trait of extreme self-absorption. So he did everything for himself, regardless. He wanted Sita, so she had to be his wife. She didn't want to be his wife. He didn't care about that. So that's what they call asuri pravritti. That very different mindset. Not there are two types of pravrittis. One is asuri, the other is devi. So asuri pravritti is that selfish and only looking at your own interest. That was his fault, and that made him lustful. All his thing, and it dragged him down. When Hanumanji first sees him in the court, when he's, Indrajit captures him and takes him there, And he allows himself to get captured. It's not like he wanted to go to the
he
court.
wanted
That's
to
why
go
he
to the
allows
court.
himself to be captured. He sees Ravan sitting in this throne, and he looks at him and he thinks, oh, what a powerful person, what an imposing character. It's a pity that he has this character flaw. Because if he didn't have that character flaw,
He'd be some.
he would be a great person. He was a good ruler. He was great to his people. Lanka was prosperous. That way he was great. He was a musician par excellence. He played the veena.
So what sets him apart is the
What his
dharmic aspect of it.
He was adharmi. There's no point of all that. So people who say that he's a hero,
He's not.
right, he's not a hero.
The basic requisite is
The basic quality
is-
of a hero is
not.
lacking. So what is the use of all those other qualities if you're practicing adharma, right? So his adharma was his downfall.
But then, rolling back, like we were discussing, how did Ramayana begin?
हाँ.
तो you were saying कि कैसे वाल्मीकि नारद से पूछते हैं और कि भाई कौन है ऐसा व्यक्ति, तो what was the response?
So Narad says, okay, given me a tough task because it's very difficult to find, it's very durlabh to find all these qualities in one person. You're asking me, he should be all these things that you just read out, plus he should be extremely good looking. How often do you find that? Someone who's intelligent and capable and not jealous and all these things, right? It's not easy. But he said there is one. He says, and that person is Rama. So Narad, that's what he said. And then he tells Valmiki the whole Ramayana in short. So the Ramayana has 2 Ramayans in the Ramayana. It's like actually 3, because even later Hanuman sings the Ramayana to Sita.
Okay.
But in the beginning, it's what they call the Sankshipt Ramayana.
So I'll tell you, so when you tell me कि हनुमान अगर सीता मैया को बताते हैं, वो रामायण गा के बताते हैं, तो I've grown in generation जिसके अंदर वो गाना सुना है, जननी में
Yes,
दूत हनुमान.
yes. And he sings that, why he does that? It's very interesting why he does that. He's very smart. Now, he was a Veda Pandit, he could speak Sanskrit brilliantly. He knew 9 forms of Sanskrit grammar, not just Patanjali. He knew 9 different grammarians.
You would argue Patanjali came later or earlier?
No, I'm saying, yeah, you're right. But he knew 9 forms. I don't know who, Patanjali is probably later, but I'm saying he knew 9 forms of Sanskrit grammar that were at that time. So he was a real Pandit. But he says, he says, if I come to talk to her in Sanskrit, she may not trust me. She might think I'm Ravan in disguise, because don't forget, he's a Vanar. They are actually tribal. So if you just imagine you go to a tribal area and that tribal comes and talks to you in perfect English. You'll wonder, you'll think there's something wrong, right? So it was like that. He says, okay, now if I speak in perfect Sanskrit to her, she is going to suspect me that maybe I am sent by Ravan or something, or maybe I'm Ravan in disguise, because he had fooled her once. So he says, now what language should I speak to her? Should I speak to her in Sanskrit or in the Prakrit, in some local dialect? Then he says, nahi. What I'll do is I'll sing the story and the praise of Sri Ram. Because when she hears that, then she'll be at ease that I'm not an enemy. So that's how he sings it.
By the way, which language was he speaking in then?
He does it in Sanskrit.
He does it in Sanskrit.
In Valmiki Ramayana, I don't know, I wasn't there. But going by Valmiki Ramayana, it's in Sanskrit because the whole thing. But
glad you're not going by Gita press version, that he's doing both these languages. He's also choosing to speak in English.
But, yes, English also. But he sings it. He sings the praises. And that immediately she knows that this is obviously not an enemy.
There's this, in the prologue also, you mentioned Bhagwan Ram, and you've written, and I think there's an entire paragraph about sporting a handsome appearance as beautiful as his inner nature.
Yes.
Rama is broad-shouldered with powerful arms, a wide chest, a sturdy conch-shaped neck, muscular clavicles, and a firm jaw. This fearless man is puissant enough to handle even the mightiest bow, vanquishing his enemies with ease. His long arms extend almost to his knees.
Ajanabahu he was.
Yet he is perfectly proportionate without a hint of ungainliness, evidenced by his majestic gait. His head is well-shaped, His eyes are large and his forehead is broad. He is tall, though not unduly so, and while he has the look of a mighty warrior, he bears a gentle demeanor. His complexion is radiant, and he is blessed with all the bodily characteristics considered auspicious in the Samudrika Shastra. I mean, for a lot of you out there, this prologue essentially sets the tone and context. Why perhaps it's important, because when you're describing a character, when you're describing a person here, and Valmiki ji has done as beautifully, and I think it's the character of this man who's ensured that he perhaps takes that step into the higher realm where he's not just a Purush, he's a Purushottam, and of course going to the ways and knowing कि वो भगवान का रूप बन गए. You've also written in the prologue, or perhaps in the introduction, you've written how he was also an avatar of Vishnu.
He was.
Share that story, because we know कि ये कहानी तो जानना चाहिए उन्होंने नारद से, but how Valmiki understands who he sees, who is Ram, and how did his story begin?
So, the Valmiki actually describes him as a human being. He does not focus on the avatar aspect. He is an avatar, and that is acknowledged, but that's not the aspect that he is focusing on. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that when actually even Sri Ram didn't know that he was an avatar. He didn't know that he was in anything special.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that when Vishnu took birth in this form, he took birth to kill Ravan. That was the purpose of the avatar, right? So Ravan had a boon, and you know that his boon was that he could not be killed by anybody. He could not be killed by Deva, Asura, Rakshasa, Kinnara, Pashu, Pakshi, Naga, no one. He told, in his arrogance, he told Brahma, he says, you can leave out human beings. They are completely useless, weak, pointless creatures. They can't do anything to me. So it was his arrogance that he says you can leave them out of the list. So that became like a loophole for his death. So when this avatar took place, Sri Rama did not know that he was divine in any way. He had no knowledge of himself as different from any human being.
But through his life, he may have enacted, he may have acted how perhaps devas or gods would. But क्या उन्हें अंदाजा था? Did he have any?
He had no knowledge. He had no knowledge.
And the world around him?
Nobody knew. Nobody knew. Maybe the rishis
Jैसे
knew.
Mahabharata, Shri Krishna.
Shri Krishna was a different avatar. He knew.
He knew. It was an avatar, and he showed that reflection.
But he didn't have that problem, na?
Yeah.
Kansa and all that didn't have the Vardhan that Ravan had. So you see, he could not have killed Ravan if he had knowledge of his divinity. He could not have done that. He had to be an ordinary human being, because that was the only loophole.
So then, would you say that it was a later addition somewhere?
That which
that
addition?
he was a Vishnu avatar?
No, he was a Vishnu avatar. It's just that he didn't know it. You see, he did not know it.
So share that story also, because when the avatar took shape.
When the avatar took place. So what happened was, there was Dashrath didn't have any children.
Yes.
And he kept marrying, so in the hope that he will have an heir to the throne. So then he does a yagya.
Now I'm curious, how many wives he had?
He had 350 wives in this, plus 3 principal wives.
3 principal wives.
So those 3 are the only ones we know. We don't know the names of the others.
So the 3 principal wives is through whom or with whom he wanted to have an heir.
Have children.
Yeah.
So the first one was Kaushalya. She was childless. Then he marries Sumitra. She was also childless. Then he marries Kaikeyi, and he hopes that she also ends up being childless. Then he doesn't know what to do, and then he decides that I'll do a yagya. So he does this Ashwamedha yagya with a add-on to that, which is the Putra Kameshti, to get a heir to the throne. So when he does the yagya,
So when the horse is sent, वो एक साल के अंदर, एक साल के बाद
that deity comes out from the fire and gives him the payasam. And in the payasam he divides amongst his 3 wives, and he gives Sumitra 2 helpings, because he first gives Kaushalya the biggest share because she is the first wife, right? That's by thing. Then he gives Sumitra, then he gives Kaikeyi, and then a little bit is left. Then he thinks, whom should I give it to? He gives it to Sumitra.
Okay.
So that's why she has twins.
Okay.
So she has 2 children, and the others have 1 each. And the biggest share goes to Kaushalya. Now, it's said that Vishnu, when he divided himself into 4 and took birth as the 4 sons. So they were all Vishnu avatars.
Vishnu avatars.
They were all part of the same energy. Okay. But the purpose, see the difference actually in Vedanta, in our Shastras, in a way we are all avatars, because we are all that supreme reality in a form. All of us. You know, they say that we come from that supreme reality.
So,
right?
so what you are arguing is Bhagwan Ram is as much an avatar as you and I are.
The difference, there is a difference between him as an avatar and us. And the difference is he didn't get born for karma. So we are born because of karma. We do something, we have to experience the result. So he didn't get born, and a divine avatar doesn't come for karma. A divine avatar is born to help humanity. As in the Bhagavad Gita it says, na, it's born paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam. So to help the innocent, to protect the innocent, and to vanquish the evil. That is the purpose of an avatar. That is not our purpose. Our purpose is to experience our karmas, and we are born for that, so that we learn. But that divine energy is beyond karma. It doesn't need to come here for karma. It comes only for to help.
Okay, so Vishnu avatars became the 4 sons.
Became the 4 sons.
But why did Vishnu avatar lene ka naubat kyun aayi?
Because of Ravan's atyachar. Basically, every time and this is not just in that yuga. Again, going back to Bhagavad Gita, because everything is there, which is then enacted in the Ramayana, right? So Bhagavad Gita says that yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. So what is it? Srijamyaham, I manifest myself. So that supreme reality that manifests as everything on earth. Everything on earth is ultimately that supreme reality, right? In a form.
Right.
But as a special avatar, as a special form, that supreme reality manifests yuge yuge, in age after age, for this purpose, for this divine purpose.
So the
to
purpose
vanquish evil and to protect the innocent.
So the purpose right here was
was the atyachar, yes, that he was spreading over the whole. He may be just symbolic of general atyachar that was happening, but yes, him and his whole clan, they were creating.
What was it? The clan of Rakshas?
The clan of the Rakshasas, exactly.
But you've also added in a footnote somewhere, na, ki Rakshasas, and you're defining it, that were beings with a proclivity for wickedness, though not all were evil.
Yeah, not all were evil, but yes.
So Rakshasas would...
Like Vibhishan was also a Rakshasa, right?
So Rakshasa,
but he was not evil.
But were they a tribe, were they a community, or what?
They were descendants. See, if you go to the Puranas, they tell you this whole history. And actually in the Uttarakhand it tells you this whole thing about, there's a whole chapter there. They are from, there are 2 brothers, Hetu and Prahetu. So it's from them that this clan comes.
Okay. And then where did the Vanaras come in from?
The Vanaras were a species of humans who lived in the forest, they're tribals. But they were born through the
All of them or some of them were born
Some
through,
of them were born.
through
I mean,
Devatas?
they existed, but some of them were born through the Devas for this purpose,
The
for
forest
this
is a,
divine plan.
Vayu Putra, Hanuman. So for the
Yes,
plan to,
yes.
so that they could help Ram
Yes.
defeat
Exactly.
Ravana.
So they each took birth, and of course, Hanumanji is the perfect example. He was the son of the Vayu, right?
But how about
Pavan Putra.
So in Ramayana, what is it the bond that Hanuman and Bhagwan Ram share? Is
So-
it of a friend? Is it of a or that Hanuman knew the godly or the divine nature of Bhagwan Ram?
No, he didn't know the divine nature. He admired him immensely for the person that he was. So he,
But how did he know from the first interaction?
I don't think he knew from the first interaction. He was there in Kishkinda for a while, right? They didn't go right away to. They had to be there for. There was the monsoon time, that they were there for the first Wali. That whole incident happened. Sugriva got crowned. Then 4 months they had to stay there because in a cave. He was in a cave. He didn't stay in the city because that was against the rules of the Vanvas. So he did stay in a cave, and so he was in Kishkinda for at least, I would say, 4+ months.
Okay.
So he probably got to know him in that period.
Okay.
He got to know him, and he respected him tremendously. But the interesting thing, when he goes to Lanka and he meets Sita ji there, and he's so impressed with her, he comes back, he goes as a Ram Bhakt, comes back as a Sita Bhakt. So that's interesting, because when he comes back and he has to, he says, he's found Sita. He says, Drishta Devi. He says, I've seen her. He tells, Sita has been found, basically, he says to Rama. But before saying that, he turns like this to the south and he bows, and then he says it. So see, he's gone as a Ram Bhakt, but he comes back as a
Sita
Bhakt. So that's a little sort of
That makes
nugget from the Ramayana, which is very endearing. And then it's so sweet. Sri Ram says to him, he says, I'm so grateful to you for having found her, and I don't know what I have nothing to give you because I'm in Vanvas. I don't own anything. He says, all I can give you is a big hug. So he gives him a big hug, and for Hanuman, he feels that was more special than anything he could have given him. Just the hug. There's some endearing parts of the Ramayana. They're very touching.
Cosmically endearing, I would say. So, एक aspect ये भी, so he may or may not have been, or he was I would correct myself, he was an avatar of
Yes,
Vishnu.
absolutely.
But वाल्मीकि उनको उनकी human qualities के लिए appreciate करते हैं.
Right.
And soon after he was born, we've discussed कि कैसे वो जन्मे. और उसके बाद must have taken some time or some exercise or some effort before he began to become the man that he was, right? So what was his education like? Or, how about the story of how he got married?
So he was educated. There's not much written about his childhood. Unlike the Krishna Avtar, where there's reams and reams about him in his childhood and all the naughtiness he did, there's nothing much about his childhood.
Why do you think so?
Well, maybe there was nothing much to write because he was very good. Krishna was very naughty. So there's a lot to write about. But maybe he was a very good, I don't know. But there isn't.
But that's a very good response though. When tough characters or naughty characters make a great story.
It's more fun to write about.
Yeah.
So, and maybe that's why when the second Avtar, he said, okay, I was so good then, now let me do some Nakat.
Fair enough.
So, anyway, there's not much. It's just, he was born, and then the next time you hear about it is, they go to Vashishta's ashram and they become, that's their Gurukul, and they learn everything there and all that. They come back. And when they come back, Dashrath wants to, he's very happy that he has 4 heirs. He wants to get them married, Rama married especially. So he is sitting and thinking about this, and Vishwamitra comes to the court. And Vishwamitra comes to take him, to protect his yagya. So he comes and he asks for him. And when Dashrath of course says, welcome, welcome, and he comes, nay, say what you want and I'll give it. Dashrath had that thing, very magnanimous.
Raja Sahab.
Raja Sahab. He say whatever you want, I will do for you. So then when he says what he wants, then he doesn't want to do it. So अच्छा मैंने क्यों बोल दिया? So he says to him, Vishwamitra says, I would like to take your son Rama to protect my yagya from these two Rakshasas who are causing me grief. So then Dasharatha faints. He says, my goodness, my son, and he says, this is when chronology comes in, the age. He doesn't tell his age. He says, he is not yet 16. He says, Una Shodasha Varsha. That means he is less, Una means less, Shodasha is 16. So he says he is less than 16. So he could be anything. Because 16 was the age that you were ready to be a warrior. It was like you're 18, you get your driver license, right? Driver's license.
16.
So 16 was considered fit to go to war.
And 16 right now is 10th class.
So that time 16 was the age.
People want to do their PhDs before they become, eligible to do anything at all. Okay.
So he says that he's not ready. Basically what he's saying is he's not ready. Like you can say, you're not ready to drive yet. You're not yet 18. You could be at that time 17 or 16 also. But so he doesn't say. Okay, so we know this is one place mark. He's not yet 16. Then when he goes to Kaushalya, later, I'm fast forwarding, when he's going to the Vanvas, he goes to take his leave of his mother.
No, I don't want you to jump abhi to the age.
I'm telling you about the age.
No, but what happens, the story needs to be complete though.
Oh, about the marriage?
No, not this is marriage. Of course the marriage, क्योंकि इसके बाद ही तो marriage हुआ था. तो what happened there?
Vishwamitra story.
Yes, sure.
Oh, you want to hear that? Okay. So Vishwamitra takes him, and then because everybody knows that Lakshman can't live one day without his brother, he's also sent along. Dashrath says, you take him also, because he knows that he won't
brothers,
like. So both of them go. And they go, and then Vishwamitra tells them stories along. They go walking, and he tells them the stories along the way. And then he takes him to kill Tataka. Tataka is one Rakshasi who's in a forest. And this is the first lesson that he learns, that, see, they had a rule then that you didn't kill a woman. Women were held in very high esteem and had a very high status in Vedic times. So killing a woman, ill-treating a woman, raising your hand on a woman was a no-no. Okay, you did not do that. So when he goes there and Vishwamitra says, you need to kill this Tataka, he hesitates, because on the one hand the Guru is saying do it, on the other hand in his mind it's not right to kill a woman, right? Then Vishwamitra explains that, she is a terrorist to society. She's doing so much damage to society that in this case, the higher dharma is to kill her. Even though she's a woman, there are two dharmas in conflict. One is...
Yeah, but does Vishwamitra help him get that clarity? Or
he tells him, he tells him. He tells him that, in this case, you please don't let her hide behind her gender. She needs to be removed because she is danger to society. So when there is... That is the higher dharma, is to get rid of the danger to society, rather than saying, I won't kill her because she's a woman. So that gyan he gives him. And then he goes and they protect the yagya, and day and night, they're doing this vigil, the two boys, Rama and Lakshmana. And then finally this, I'm jumping. Tataka is in the forest. So then he kills Tataka there in the forest. She comes out and he kills her. It's not easy to kill her, but he does, right? And then after that, Vishwamitra takes him to his yagya to protect it. And he says, I'm going to do this yagya, you have to stand guard. So they stand guard day and night. And finally, this Maricha and Subahu come out, right? They're very quiet, they don't come out. Then they come out finally, and they start trying to destroy the yagya, and then Subahu is, as I mentioned,
Killed.
he's killed, and Maricha is thrown into
in the
the sea.
water.
So then after that, this job is done, then Rama says, okay, now if you're done with us, I guess it's time to go back. And he says, no, I want you to come with me, because he's a matchmaker. You see, Vishwamitra was also a matchmaker. In those days, the rishis, I guess, were matchmakers as well. That was their
I mean, many Brahmins do the same.
They
thing
do the
today.
same now. So he knew that Raja Janaka had this daughter, and that people were coming. And he knew also that Rama could lift that bow, because that was the precondition, that she would only marry.
How did he know that he could lift that bow?
Because he was, as a guru, he knew his
Capabilities.
He knew, like a good
But
guru
was
will
it-
know what his
But
student.
Vishwamitra was the guru also? Is that
He was a
fairly
guru
written?
now. I mean,
Now he was a
yeah,
guru.
he was.
But there's not much written about how before he was taken.
Before that, it was Vasishtha,
Before
but
it
he knew. And also, you know, these rishis, they had foresight. They had a lot of gyan which is not ordinary.
Not quantifiable
Yeah,
or intangible, perhaps.
So he knew. And so he says to him, he doesn't say, I'm taking you there for this purpose. He says, Raja Janaka has got a very beautiful bow and he's doing some yagya and you should come and see it. So he says, okay, fine. And they go there. And when they go there, then he says, there's no Swayamvara in Valmiki Ramayana.
Okay.
So people just come from time to time to try their luck with that bow.
Okay.
So when they go there, then he says to Raja Janaka, he says that show the bow to these two boys. So he does, and then Rama says, looks at it, and then he says, can I lift it? And he lifts it, and he lifts it easily, and then he tries to string it, and when he's stringing it, he strings it so tight that it snaps, it breaks. The bow breaks, and then that's how they get married, because then Raja Janaka is so happy. So they don't meet before that.
No, it wasn't a Swayamvar.
There was no Swayamvar.
This was no Swayamvar. But Raja Janaka found.
Was delighted that finally someone has managed to do this task, and someone as great, because when they arrived itself, he looked at them and he thought, two wonderful boys. When you have daughters, then you're on the lookout for good husbands. So he looks at the two of them and he says, and he has a daughter also, Urmila, right?
Yeah.
The second one.
Yeah.
So he says, acha, these would be nice husbands. So he's very happy when he succeeds.
But do you think that Vishwamitra had introduced that these are children of so and so?
He introduced them.
Okay.
He says, these are the sons of Raja. He explains all that. And they are the students of Vasishtha, and I'm, right now I'm sort of mentoring them or whatever. He gives them the whole introduction. So he knows who they are.
And is there any way it's described at how or when Sri Ram met Sita Maiya?
It's at the marriage in Valmiki Ramayana.
In Valmiki.
They didn't have any, there's no description that I saw of any meeting before that.
No, not before that. This is when this both thing happened
In the Valmiki Ramayana, it seems at the marriage.
at the marriage.
It seems.
Where was the marriage? How was it?
It was there in Mithila only. So Dashrath and all of them come. They come with a lot of gifts, and you know what, you come with
very
the whole
usual,
wedding stuff.
But
And then
how was the love? How was the relationship between
So
Sri Ram and
then,
Sita?
once they got married, this relationship is described. They are like described as two hearts beating as one. They were absolutely in love with each other from the beginning. They completed each other. You know, whatever we think nowadays we want in a relationship is what they had. That was their, no, it was true. They had that wonderful relationship where there was no ego. You know, there was not a relationship which happens nowadays in relationships, is, you know, we have ego issues. There were no ego issues in their relationship. They were just perfect complements of each other. And so now, coming back to the chronology, the next mention of the birth, a date or the age, is Kaushalya. So when he goes to say goodbye to her, take his leave of his mother, she says, I waited for 17 years from your birth for you to become king. And now you're telling me you're going. Now look at the number, age she's saying, 17, right? So now he was not 17 because later when Sita is talking to Ravan, when he comes, there's no Lakshman Rekha and all that. She treats him as an Atiti when he comes. Before she realizes that he's Ravan, she thinks he's a sannyasi. She says, when he asks her story, she says, when my husband was 24 going on 25, when he was like, he was exiled after 12 years of marriage. We lived in Ayodhya for, look at these numbers now, 12 years and he was 25. Now Kaushalya is saying 17. So that doesn't seem to make sense. But then it makes sense because in Vedic times, there were two births. The first birth was your actual birth when you came into the world. The second birth, which was more important, was the date of your age of your Upanayanam. When you became a part of a guru, when you joined the Gurukul, when you went into education, that was the sign of education, right? The Upanayanam. So he was 17 at that time when he was calculating 17 years from the date of Upanayanam.
Okay.
So just now say 25 minus 17 is how much?
8.
That was the age he went to Gurukul.
Okay.
Right?
And
so
it
17
was less than 16.
So less than 16
when he went
and
there.
12 and 25, so he must have been 13.
He must have been 13.
So that's how you calculate.
So
from these little bits of information.
So what we understand is around 13 he went with Vishwamitra.
Yes.
Before he was 17, he was already married.
Yeah.
And by the time he was 25 or so, no, more than that. When did they go to exile?
He was 25. She says that.
25, 26. Yeah.
20, not 26.
25.
20, about to be 25.
So about to be 25, that is he went to exile.
She says that.
She says that.
She tells Ravan that. And interestingly...
So how many years does she say that they lived in...
Ayodhya? 12 years.
12 years. Okay.
She says these figures you have, 12 years, they lived in Ayodhya. So 25 minus 12...
So they got married 13. At 13 or so they got married.
See, they used to in those days. See, that's what I said, that today seems odd, but in those days, in fact, once you reached puberty, a girl got married within 3 years of attaining puberty. So whatever that age was.
I mean, back in the day, of course. So 13 or so, they got married. And 12 years they lived blissfully, happily. Does Valmiki share much about their time there?
They said that what he says is they lived as a perfect couple. They were like, they finished each other. They were like, complemented each other.
And I understand when Ravan took her away, I think Bhagwan Ram was also heartbroken.
Oh, he couldn't handle it. That description of him, of someone who was so cool, someone who was so calm, so self-controlled, he loses his self-control because he's so much in anguish. And the description, Valmiki describes it so beautifully. You feel his pain. He's running around from tree to tree saying, do you know where, oh Ashoka tree, do you know where my wife is? And he's talking to the animals, do you know where my, that kind of madness that he cannot control himself. And then he tells Lakshmana, he says, you go back. I cannot leave this place without my wife. I need her. I cannot leave. I cannot live without her. I cannot breathe without her. Life without her is meaningless for me. I have to have her. So I will find her no matter what. And then Lakshman says, no, I will also come and help you find her. He was very close to his brother.
And
he
how
was the most devoted.
Old was Ram when Sita Maya was abducted?
Okay, so that was in the 13th year. So now we have to do some math.
Yeah, we'll do the math. So we know at 13 they got married.
25 he was exiled. 13th
exiled.
year. It was towards the end of the
38.
exile. Yeah. So yeah.
So he had already spent a little more than, much more than around 2.5.
Yeah.
1.5. He was 13. There's more than twice his life.
Yeah.
He had spent with her.
Yeah.
Or about twice his life.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
And that is when she's taken away. On the
That's when
13th.
she's taken away, and that's when he completely collapses. And I mentioned earlier that he gets into a rage and he has to be calmed down. But he does calm down. And that whole thing. And then he finds her eventually.
And that's how we know the Ramayana.
We know the story.
Oh, God.
How he makes that journey and everything. And the great thing is, see, people doubt. They say, oh, it was ego and all. If he didn't love her so much, he could have just gone back to Ayodhya, right?
No, but more interestingly, I think
Well,
this is for a lot of our audience only. No? We know that after the Ramayana was over, after the battle was over, these guys came back, they, set up their own house, and then there was this episode of how people in the kingdom began doubting or began questioning, and then it just came out to be somewhere where situation turned into, a place where Sita Maiya had to leave.
Yeah.
What was that entire thing? And I think for
Yes.
the audience, and I think you're turning into the Nani and Kaki of the house, telling stories for us, because
I love doing that. I love doing that.
and I'm taking note of the figures and the numbers and years.
Okay. So
What exactly had happened?
what
Ayodhya mein
happens
kam-
is
and
they come
Valmiki-
back. They come back to Ayodhya and they live there for 2 years quite happily. And they describe it. They say everything is going beautifully. The kingdom is. He's happy. Sri Ram he's happy. He says he's with his brothers whom he loves. He's got his beloved wife with him. He doesn't want anything more in life. Everything is good. The kingdom is running well. Everything is fine. And one day they're sitting and they're watching they watch plays and all that in their garden. He had a very lovely garden and there used to be performances and all. They used to enjoy in the evening. So one day she tells him that she is pregnant. So, and he's obviously delighted because this is the possible heir to the throne, right? So he's so happy to hear. And he says, what can I give you? What present can I give you for giving me this wonderful news? She says, I don't need anything because I'm so happy. I have everything I want. What more? But she says, if you want to give me something, I do miss the ashrams, the tranquility of the ashrams that we spent time in when we were in Vanvas, and the satsang of those ashrams. So she said that I would like to go and make a visit, just for a few days. I would like to go and go to the ashrams, and I would like to get blessings for our unborn child. So, if you can make that arrangement, that's all I want. He says, no problem. Tomorrow itself, I'll send you. No issue.
Like father, like son.
No problem. So then he had a habit of doing a market survey because he was a dharmic king who wanted to know what his people actually felt. Because nobody would come and tell the king that they are dissatisfied or speak about their problems freely, and no matter how good the king is, people hesitate. But he wanted to know, nevertheless, whether they were satisfied or not. So he had employed, like a dhobi, a carpenter, not plumber, potter, all these people, who would just, who would go to the marketplace and just hang out there. And they were ordinary people, who actually did those jobs. But they would then bring feedback to him in the evening of what the pulse of the nation they would bring back. So that evening, when he went to he spoke to Bhadra, who was a dhobi. So this dhobi came and he asked, Bhadra, sab theek hai, sab theek chal raha hai? Bhadra said, haan ji, everything is good, no problem, everything is fine. But from Bhadra's expression, he felt that Bhadra is not telling the truth. Bhadra is holding something back. He's saying, haan, sab theek hai, sab theek hai. But he felt he is not, being truthful. So he says, no, tell me. If there's anything that you're holding back, I need to know. No matter whom it's about, whether it's my mother or whether it's about anybody in my family, whether it's about my brothers, me even. If the people are unhappy, I need to know. So then Bhadra says, okay, if you insist, then I'll tell you. He says, when people meet in the marketplace and they gossip, they are saying that you did a great job by getting rid of Ravan. Because he was an atyachari, he is doing so much damage. You did a great job by getting rid of him. But the next line, you have done us a great injustice by bringing Sita back and placing her in the position of queen again. Because we do not accept her as the queen, because she has lived in the house of another man. That's what the people were saying. So then he says, he was, obviously he was not livid, he was completely broken to hear that the people are upset with him for doing something that they did not want. You see, he was broken, and also that it was against the person he loved the most in the world, right? So he didn't know what to say. He asked, he said, is this just one person saying it, or? And Bhadra says, this is the general consensus, that the majority of the people felt he had wronged them. He had not done his duty as a king by bringing her back and putting her in that position, because being a queen was her actual position. It was not just like she was his wife. She had a position in the setup, in the administration as the queen. So he does not know what to do. So he dismisses Bhadra, and then he's thinking, it's evening time. He's thinking and thinking. He says, now what should I do? Because on the one hand was his duty to his people. On the other hand was his marriage and his love for his wife, whom he loved more than anything in the world. And these two were in conflict, right? So he thought, and these were his options. Valmiki doesn't lay out these options, but if you read between the lines, you get them. What were his options? The first option was probably to ignore the people. Bhadra told him in secrecy, there was no need to act on it. He could have said, Acha, maine nahi suna. But as a dharmic king, can you do that? Can you unhear what you have heard? You can't. So he could not do that. He could not ignore the wishes of the people as a dharmic king. Then the second choice he had is he could leave the kingdom and say, okay, fine, you don't like my wife, I love her. If you don't want her, then I'm going with her and we're going back into Vanvas. They were happy there. We could have lived in that. He was not pleasure loving. He was very happy being with his wife.
His
in
wife,
fact, yes. So he could have done that. But he can't do that, because you see, duty was very important. There was this dereliction of duty, it would have been. It's like in today's context, a person, say in the army, suddenly decides, I'm going back home because my wife needs me. It's dereliction of duty. You cannot ignore your duty, right? A dharmic person cannot put their duty second. So he could not do that. Third option was send her back to Raja Janaka. But then that was also not possible, because that's like almost like a divorce.
Yep.
He couldn't do that. He loved her so much. And also not only that, it was also bad for her being sent back by her husband. How could he do that to her, right? That was out of the... So these three options are out. What option was left? He thought, and he said, okay, she said she wanted to go to the ashrams, right? He knew she'd be happy there. So he says, I will put her in Valmiki's ashram. In his mind, he thinks, let me put her in this ashram. It's a separation. It's not a divorce. I have removed her from the palace, so she's not in the position of queen anymore. But she's not removed from my heart. She doesn't stop being my wife. The people didn't say that. They only said they didn't want her to be queen. So that's the best of the bad options, which is what he chose. He chose the best of the bad options. There was no good option in this situation. It was a lose-lose situation, not a win-win situation. So what could he do, right? And so he chooses that option.
And how was...
And he has it in his mind probably that after some time, if the people change their minds, if circumstances change, they can reunite. Because she's not been sent away, she's not, he's not sent her back to Raja Janaka, he's not, abandoned her. He's kept her in a place where actually he knew she would be happy. He didn't drop her in the middle of the jungle, which is what they show in movies. But that's not what he did. He sent her, and he calls Lakshmana, then he tells the next morning, he tells Lakshmana, he says, please take Sita to this ashram, Valmiki's ashram, but he says, don't bring her back. Lakshmana is devastated. He's completely devastated. He's saying, what? How can you do this? And he says, don't argue with me. You know why? because he knew that was dharma, to uphold his duty as king. So he was in a dharma sankat. On the one side was his personal happiness, on the other side was his duty as king. He put his duty as king above his personal happiness.
And how was Sita Maiya's response?
Oh, she was, so the thing is, when they're going, she doesn't know. She is very happy to go because she had wanted to go, she was expecting to go. So Lakshman takes her, and the whole way Lakshman is almost very teary and very, his face is all sad, and she scolds him. She says, "What is this? Why are you looking like this? I know you're leaving your brother for a few days, but it's okay. See, even I'm leaving him for a few days. I'm not crying. Why are you crying like this?" She scolds him for being. But then Lakshman doesn't know what to do. He's like trying to hold back the tears because he can't bear to do what he's been told to do. But he takes her across the Ganga, and then when they reach the other side, the ashram, he just breaks down. And then she says, "Now you've got to tell me, what is this all about? You've been behaving in a very peculiar manner the whole day. You please tell me what is the story." So he says, "I can't even look." He couldn't even look at her, It was so difficult for him to tell this to her. Then he says that, the people have said this, and my brother, was forced by his Raj Dharma to bring you here and to leave you in Valmiki's ashram, not bring you back. So her first reaction as a woman is extreme sorrow, obviously. This is the love of her life, and she's being separated from him. And it was very hard for her. So she cries, and she falls down and cries and all this. But she's a very strong person. See, she's not depicted as a weakling. She gets up and she says, "Okay, look at me." So he says, Lakshman says, "I have never looked beyond your feet. How can I look at," she says, "Look at my belly," because she was pregnant. So he says, "I have not looked beyond your feet. I can't even raise my eyes to look at you." So she says, "Look, I understand that my husband had to do this," because she knew dharma. She says, "I understand that he did this for dharma, that he had to do this for dharma." But then the human side is, she says, "But, I do feel pained that I have been separated from him at a time like this." So there are two sides. On the one hand, she understood her dharma and she handled it admirably. She was upset in the beginning, but she pulled herself together and she understood why it had to be done.
Was she told the reason? Lakshman?
He told her the reason. He says, "The people are saying this about you, that they don't want you to be queen, and that they want, they were upset with Rama for bringing you back, and they're saying all these things about you. In fact," he says, "they're saying things which I can't repeat." They were saying really bad things. So the thing here is, the separation didn't happen because somebody said something and his ego got upset, which is what people think. Ki ek dhobi ke kehne pe, he separated from his wife and he should not have done that, and it was ego that people were talking about. It was not ego. It was a real tragedy that he was, as a dharmic king, he was forced to choose his duty above his personal happiness and her happiness. It's their mutual happiness. He suffered probably as much, if not more than her, in a way, because he had to do the deed. He had to actually do that deed of separating. So it's a real tragic story, that two people who loved each other so much, and that's why he's great. You see, it's very difficult for us as human beings to do something that is personally hurtful.
And even comprehend what.
And to do that, and that too for other people. To put yourself, to damage yourself for the sake of others is not something that comes naturally to us as human beings, especially not in this day and age. Our thinking now is this going to hurt me or not? If it's going to hurt me, I'm not doing it.
But then they never met again?
No, they met again. So 12 years later, after that, he does an Ashwamedha Yagya, and he calls all the rishis. And by that time, Love and Kush are born, and they are 12 years old. So and they come with Valmiki to attend this yagya. And Valmiki in the meantime has taught them the whole Ramayana. This whole Ramayana that he wrote, he's taught it to them. And they had beautiful voices, so they would sing it. It's written in verse. It's not prose, right? So it's meant to be sung. And so they would sing it. And he brings them and he tells the boys, he says, you go and you sing this near the palace and in all these important locations. And they do. And then the word goes to Rama that there are these two boys who are singing your life story. So he calls them to the
The boys knew that.
no, they don't know yet. They go there to the palace, and they look exactly like him. You know, people are looking at them and they say, "Oh my gosh, you know, they're a Xerox copy of the father."
Yeah.
So and then they sing so beautifully. Not the whole Ramayana; they sing one bit of it. And he's so pleased with their singing and all that. He says, please give them gold coins and all that. He reward them, which is what kings used to do. If somebody did something, they'd reward them. And they didn't take it because Valmiki had told them, don't take any money. We are sannyasis, we don't accept money. So they refuse it. Then he says, who is your guru? Then they say Valmiki. And then they're 12 years old. And then everybody puts 2 and 2 together and they figure out that, you know, two young boys.
These 12 years is a fairly long time. In these 12 years, they did not get in touch or did not.
They didn't get in touch. For 12 years, they don't.
Because there was no mobile phone back then.
There was no WhatsApp, unfortunately.
But they did not.
But they didn't, they weren't in touch, but they loved each other as much.
But why?
That love didn't diminish. Because
I want you to read between the lines a little more. Why do you think Bhagwan Ram did not reach out to Sita Maiya in these 12
Because
years?
that was the whole thing, na? She was separated from him. There was no sort of interaction that would have had any meaning. If he continued to, she would have still, I guess, been in. And how difficult that is, right? To.
I mean, if you want to break, you better snap ties then.
It's better to be separate rather than to keep that thing going. It's like an open sword then. I guess. I don't know. Now you're asking me stuff that I have to get into their minds to figure out.
I'm using modern relationship
thinking.
Analogies to understand an age-old relationship.
But actually we can't really think the way, because they had a different mindset.
And they were all devoted to each other.
They were separate, but they were not separate.
And Prabhu Ram did not
Mentally,
have
they were not separate.
He did not have another wife.
Oh, no. He didn't look at another woman. Forget another wife.
These 12 years,
he does not look at another. In fact, it says that he did a lot of yagyas, because that's what kings did in those days. And to do a yagya successfully, you have to have your wife present. The wife, the head queen, and in his case, the head queen was the one queen, has to be present to make that yagya successful. So everybody told him to get married because you need a wife, right? He said no. And he built a statue of her, had a statue built of her, a golden statue. And he used to place that there and do the yagya. So she was never stopped being his wife.
So in these 12 years, did the Ayodhya Vasis have some sort of regret or some sort of a realization?
So this is what happens is when they discover that these boys are his sons, he also feels, oh my gosh, these are my sons. Now maybe we can reunite. His first thought is, okay, now the people might have a change of heart. It's like, I give this example of, when two people get married against their parents' wishes and they run off and get married. Then the parents say, we are not talking to you, we cut you out of our family, and all this happens. But when the children are born, then they say, acha, theek hai, aajao. Then the family comes. He thought like that. Now that these boys are there, the people will change their mind. They'll now accept her back. So he asks Valmiki, he says that do you think Sita can come back and if just once she comes and tells the people that, listen, nothing happened, I'm as pure as pure, and if she says that once to the people, then they'll accept her back. He thinks that they will accept her back. So Valmiki says, okay, I'll bring her. Let her to the court and let's see. So he goes and he brings her. When she comes, she has a different thought. So he thinks that she's going to say that, listen, I'm pure and all this, and the people will then accept her and they'll live happily ever after. That's what he was thinking. She comes and she does say, she says that she has never deviated in thought from her husband ever. He's been the only person in her mind. No other person has occupied that space. And she says that. And she says that, but she says something very sad. She says, if I have been pure, if I am this, she says, she asks Mother Earth, she says, take me within you. And the earth opens up and she goes in. So the reason is, why did she do that? A lot of people say, acha, she did that. He sent her away, now he's calling her back. Again, ego issues that we interpret based on our modern day thinking. But that's not why she did it. She did it because she knew that the people are very fickle. See, the Janta is very fickle. Today and then also. We change our minds. You know, 1 minute we like someone, next minute we dislike them. Right? 1 minute we vote for somebody, next minute we don't vote for them.
And
that is our
some cutters.
That is our human nature. The Janta is not something you can rely on to be steady. And she thought that, okay, now if they say come back, then after some time they'll say, no, actually we've changed our mind. Something, then again he'll be in a dharma sankat. Why get into this situation? Why put him in that situation? Better than that is to just go back to Mother Earth and be out of this, where you're not subject to people's opinions back and forth. You see what the thinking? It's a little strange for us to wrap our heads around, but it was a kind of like a selfless act. She could have gone back and lived with him, right? But she was thinking more of the duty as a king and his duty to his people. She knew the people didn't really want her. So if, just they came around and they said, okay, then next time somebody said something, what would he do? Then what would he do? Right? It could happen again. They said it once. What happens if it happens again? Then back to square one. So she goes. So that is the tragedy. That's why it's so tragic that, two people could not be together who loved each other so much.
Star-crossed lovers are never together.
Yes.
And Bhagwan Ram was perhaps more than 50 years of age.
So now we have to do some more math.
He was
38, 39 he was when he came back.
Plus
2 years, how much
41.
is that? Plus 12.
53. So we were 53 is when Sita Maiya passed away.
Yes.
Passed away.
She gave up her
She
life.
gave up her life.
She just actually became one with the earth. She says, I came from the earth, I'm going back to the earth. She's called Bhumija, right?
Yeah.
She comes from the Bhumi.
I didn't realize, we were discussing so much about dharma and now we're discussing...
We've gone
under the love. Two themes again. So love and dharma are two things that you can write reams and reams of poetry and literature on.
Absolutely.
And you'll still fall short.
Yes. In fact, you know what? I'm writing a book right now on dharma.
See?
Because I felt after writing this, I felt, you know what? I've talked about dharma, but what is dharma? The question you asked me, that is so difficult to answer.
In fact, there's an essay in the annexure of the book where you discuss.
I do,
dharma.
very brief.
I think that becomes a very good prologue or introduction.
Yes,
for the
that's an
forthcoming
introduction,
book.
yeah. But I'm writing like a full book because it has to be demonstrated. So I try and demonstrate it.
Through examples?
Through examples, and I have various chapters.
So you must bring Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Bhagavad Gita and everything that we perhaps discussed in this conversation.
Yes.
Where does Hanuman come into the entire play of things? Now, I ask this, I want to take this as a closing question because I've been a Hanuman Bhakt for a really long time. I've been fasting in the name of Hanuman for I think over 18 years now.
Yes.
Every Tuesday. So, and I realized that when Pran Pradishthan
Yes.
हुआ था in January 22nd. So, then I realized I was calculating कितने साल हो गए ये रखते हुए, वो मुझसे पूछे मैं कितना बड़ा राम भक्त हूँ, हम भी कतार में हैं. So, where was Hanuman in the scheme of things?
So he was actually a minister of Sugriva. I'm talking about his job
Yeah.
description.
Yeah.
But when he, and he continued to be actually, even after, he didn't stay back in Ayodhya. Huh? He
Okay.
goes back, he comes only when later, when Sri Rama decides to go into the Saryu, you know, he gives up his life in the Saryu, then he comes at that time. But before, he's not in Ayodhya.
So
For
his
the-
role essentially just for, you know,
he's there in the role of the bhakt. In he's like does the greatest seva that you can do, and that's what he is recognized for. In fact, when the coronation happens, and he's after that he gets a lot of gifts, and he gets a necklace, you know, from, I think Indra gives it to him, this necklace, and he gives it to Sita, and she says, I want to give it to someone who you know, who deserves to have this, someone really great. And you know whom she gives it to? She gives it to Hanuman for his seva, because that was what he did. He did so much service for them. In fact, Rama says, he says, I can never repay his service. I cannot repay him for the great service that he has done by finding Sita.
but by finding Sita.
Yeah.
So he's there as a bhakt.
And what the whole thing of, you know, the way he did it.
Devotion and selflessly.
Yeah. That description you should read in the Sundarakand. The Sundarakand is very beautiful, because if you love Hanuman, you love the Sundarakand.
Of course, Sundarkand part
If
is
you don't read anything, just read that.
Sundarkand part.
Yeah, yeah.
Done. Quite enjoyed myself. Very enriching conversation, and I'm sure our viewers also are going to find the same. I highly recommend this book, and more so, I'll recommend that people watch this interview and perhaps more of it. Where's it? Oh yes, sorry. So here's the book. Very beautifully written, like I've shared earlier. But and I'll say this, I wasn't really sure how you would be to interview or to talk about Ram. And I've seen a couple of your interviews, and I thought that would you be able to share these stories as magically as you've written them? And I frankly, I've quite enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
And I think there are many, many more stories inside of you. There are many more stories which are waiting to be told from this book itself, actually. And all of them should take the shape of, you know, some recording, some podcast. Those videos need to come out, because what you are perhaps doing is a great service. It will be too much of an example, but just like ब्रह्मा ने अवतार वो आशीर्वाद दिया था और कहा था वाल्मीकि जी को कि रामायण लिखो, something magically, you know, something similar perhaps you might have gone through, that these words, the story came out so well, and it just not got, you know, it just not reflects in the words that you've written, but it's also reflecting in everything that you've shared with us. So thank you very much for writing this. Thank you very much for joining us in this conversation. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure many people who would watch this interview, they'll take many more lessons and perhaps learn more about dharma. And I think I'll be waiting for that book on dharma. And that's a question and that's a discussion for a later day, but always present, always important in the times that we're living in. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Pranam.